Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, we have a tremendous amount of information to gather with you, so I'm going to hit on some points, and then we're going to get into the main meat of our show today, which is a school that affects all the other education at the academia level to the lower levels, all the levels of social policy, social engineering, and it's probably a school you have never heard of, but it's had a detrimental effect in all of our lives for many decades. But let's just touch on some things here. You probably saw this. New York Times praises Mao. And who are they talking about? They're talking about Mao Zedong, one of the biggest murderers in the history of mankind. Now, Mao was financed through bankers in the United States and England. He was a known communist, a globalist, and we basically took Chiang Kai-shek, which wanted to format another United States of America, if you would, a laissez-faire economy, constitutional republic form of government, common law form of judicial system, which we used to have, past tense in this country. But anyway, depending on who you read, because we don't know all the numbers, but Mao killed anywhere from 80 million to 149 million people. Now, of course, we get back into this whole thing about what Lenin said, was one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is merely a number, because it's the psychology of it all that, we just can't picture and fathom, millions and millions of people being brutally murdered by government. So Mao, we took Chiang Kai-shek, we put him on an island known as Formosa. Today you call it Taiwan, and then we gave the rest of the mainland of China and the surrounding islands to a brutal dictator by the name of Mao Zedong. And of course, the New York Times is praising him. But this isn't a surprise by the New York Times. I did some other research on it. I found articles, the New York Times praising Castro, praising Stalin, all these brutal, the only brutal dictator I couldn't find them actually praising was Pol Pot from Cambodia. So very interesting, no surprises here, but it's just another thing, my friends. What Stalin did to the people in the Ukraine, how he starved out millions and millions and millions, and the New York Times was reporting how Ukraine was doing so well, the people were flourishing and so forth. This went on for years, so no surprises with the New York Times. Okay, you probably saw that Representatives Presley and AOC, they set up a GoFundMe site to bail out a bailout fund for the activists that are going to get violent at the event that's going on in Boston. Now you may ask, boy, what event's going on in Boston that they already know there's going to be violence, and these representatives are setting up a GoFundMe site to bail out the activists, the nihilist agent provocateurs that are going to get violent at this event. What could this event be? Well, my friends, there is an event going on coming up in Boston, and it is a straight event, pro-family event. So they're going to try to disrupt this event because, after all, you've been taught that you have to let these people encroach because otherwise, you have to have tolerance. But they can't have tolerance. They don't have tolerance for a pro-family, pro-heterosexual event. They can have all their events, pedophilia, all these different things. But boy, if it doesn't go along with what their program is, you are not allowed to have it. Okay, you probably heard the quote from Rand Paul. I found this very, very interesting. That Rand Paul says, quote unquote, now that John Bolton is out, the world is much safer from a world war. And I could not agree with Representative Rand Paul anymore. John Bolton, as we know, is a warmonger. He has been responsible for many wars, both covert and above board. And he also was the one who was responsible for the collapse of what was going on between Kim Jong-il of North Korea and President Trump of the United States, and how, since 1952, what's been going on in the Korean Peninsula was about to come to an end, but John Bolton put the screws into that. Okay, The other thing I wanted to get into with you, there was a hearing this past Tuesday with regards to Epstein's attorneys, and what came out of that meeting, and I read just about all of it, was that Larry Epstein's attorneys are very skeptical of the official determination that he committed suicide. Gee, do you think? Now, of course, Bob Barr has said that, well, he's seen some quote-unquote irregularities, but nothing criminal. Really? Now, some lowercase FBI agents are saying the same, that they also are skeptical of the official version. Of course, they will not come out and say this officially, but from what they were saying off comment is that they are very skeptical of the events that took place with Jeffrey Epstein. The other thing is, my friends, if you notice that the mainstream media has ignored this case altogether. You know, the cameras don't work, protocols not followed, prison guards switched, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things that we know that went on, and things that were supposed to go on that didn't go on, but the mainstream media has ignored all of this. And you probably saw this one. Cannibalism is the new in. That's right, my friends. A Swedish scientists, and this is going on in California now, they're actually promoting this in California. Magnus Soderlund, S-O-D-E-R-L-U-N-D, has come out and said that cannibalism is going to save the earth from global warming. That's right, my friends. They are now going to promote cannibalism. You know, cannibalism has been going on for centuries, particularly in New Guinea, which they stopped it in 1960. And of course, you know, there's diseases that come out of cannibalism. And as a matter of fact, there was a big outbreak of this from North Korea in 2013 because the people are so famished there that they are actually eating their dead, which is going on right now in Venezuela. So Bernie Sanders and all you followers, Kamala Harris, if you want to experience what goes on with socialism, I invite you to get on a plane, Bernie, and go down to Venezuela, and you will be in the Mecca of socialism. Now, I don't know if you've heard this. This has not been on the mainstream media, but there's a new fetish going on, my friends, with couples here in the United States. Are you ready for this? Couples are getting pregnant and then having abortions. This is the new fetish. The whole thing about getting pregnant, and then the whole thing about going and killing your children. And couples are doing this multiple times, my friend. This isn't just one thing, multiple, one single incident. I was reading about a couple that they've had 4 of them now, and they find this uplifting to know that they have the power to create and the power to destroy. And this is the new fetish. You're going to see a lot of it. But what does this say about where we are today, my friends? Especially with the young people. You know, cannibalism being pushed forward. The new sexual fetish is to get your girl pregnant and then, then to have the abortion. Really, really incredible when you think about the level of depravity and the mindset that you have to have, that while you're consummating the relationship and that you're going to have the potential to have a baby, that you are purposely getting pregnant so that you can kill life. Really, really incredible. Oh, you probably saw, and this is another sign of the wars that are coming. Romania repatriated 103.7 tons worth $3.84 billion from the Bank of England. Folks, if you watch this going on constantly, because a lot of countries are repatriating their gold, their physical gold, to get it in their possessions because of the concerns about the wars that are coming. Now, I wanted to upgrade one thing with you folks. In 1963, there was a cycle that I did a whole show on this cycle many, many years ago. It's called the Prentice cycle. It was developed by a gentleman by the name of Henry Webb Prentice Jr. And if you want to look it up, it's P-R-E-N-T-I-S. But he put together this wonderful cycle of events and cycle of humanity where man goes. And I'm just going to do this whole thing with you, because before when I went over this with you some years ago, I told you where we were at this point, and I think there's something to be encouraged about, because we have gone along deeper into the cycle. But the cycle, again, it was written in 1963, and it's the cycle of man with regards to relationship to government. And first, man goes from bondage and then to spiritual faith. And then from spiritual faith, he gains courage because of the spiritual faith. And then from courage, he goes to liberty because of the spiritual faith that he developed the courage, and the courage developed the means to act, the desire to act because of the faith, which brought forth liberty. And then from the liberty, people always go to abundance because they've gotten the yokes of government off of them. They've put government back in the box where it belongs, not to rule our lives, but to protect our life with regards to the pursuit of happiness, liberty, and so forth, which is what the written statement is in our Constitution and in our founding documents. And then from abundance, man has gone from selfishness. And then from selfishness, because they have everything, to apathy. They no longer are focused on where government is. They no longer are focused on what is going on around them. And then from apathy, they go into a state of dependence. And we are in a state of dependency. Look how 52% of the people in the United States are under a state of dependency with regards to the American people and their relationship to their government. And then from dependency, we go right into that backstage again of bondage. Now, when I first went over this with you back in, it was probably about 6 years ago, I said to you that the state that we are in right now, in my humble estimate, was that we are in a state of dependency and bondage. Well, my friends, we're starting to see signs that, yes, we are still in that state of dependency and bondage, but we are incrementally gaining spiritual faith. And I really mean that. And I'm not talking about these mass churches where, things go on that I won't even get into. I'm not talking about these 501c3 IRS Johnson Act amended corporations that you call churches. I am talking about people at the level of themselves where they're doing their own research. People are getting their Bibles out again. People are praying again. People are searching for God again outside of the 501c3 IRS corporations. There really are. I'm starting to see signs of it socially, independently, and also incrementally in talking with people. People are starting to search again. And that is massive, my friends, because that is going to take us out of the state of bondage and dependency and bring us forth into having the courage to act. And then from the courage to act, my friends, we will acquire liberty again. Okay, I want to get into, and before I do, I want to read a couple of quotes for you. And this is from George Collins, who really had a good understanding of what was going on. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. I could not agree more with Mr. George Collins here. One more from Mr. Collins. Here's a bumper sticker I'd like to see. We are the proud parents of a child who has resisted his teacher's attempts to break his spirit and bend him to the will of his corporate masters. Folks, if you remember, we talked about Bertrand Russell. We read that quote to you many, many, many times about how the school system was set up so that the student, upon graduation, would not be able to critical think and will act only as his schoolmasters would have desired. That's exactly what's going on. So why do I bring that up? Because I bring that up because we had two anniversaries recently. We had the one yesterday, September 11th, the anniversary of 9/11, and 11 days before that, we had the anniversary, 10 days before that, we had the anniversary of Ruby Ridge with Randy Weaver. Now, I have met Randy Weaver on numerous occasions. Stanley and I have had the opportunity to sit down with him and listen to him and look in the man's eyes as he describes about what took place at Ruby Ridge. How they killed his wife while he was holding his infant daughter, Sarah. How they shot his son, his nephew. How they shot him in the back. How they killed his dog. How all this went on and nobody went to prison for it. Actually, Lon Hudiochi was promoted and went on to do the trigger work at Waco to kill all the women and children there. And who was in charge of that whole operation at that time, at the upper echelon level, my friends? A guy named Bob Barr, the current Attorney General of the United States, who was always, him and Mueller always seemed to come into play when there's something needs to be covered up. And what did they do at Waco after they murdered all the women and children? They burnt it all to the ground and then took everything, all the remnant that was left, and they put it into vats of bleach. Why? So there'd be no forensic evidence left, so they could cover up what they did. What did they do at Ruby Ridge? They burnt everything to the ground. Why? So there'd be no forensic evidence. What did they do at the Murrah building in Oklahoma City? Right? What did they do then? Because they knew the forensic evidence would show that that building was blown up from the inside. What did they do? They burnt it to the ground and took away all of the forensic evidence, never to be seen again. What did they do at 9/11? They collected all the evidence and sent it overseas so it would never be seen again. And no forensic evidence. Think of that. The biggest terrorist act in the history of this country, no crime scene established, no forensic evidence taken and analyzed. Think of that. So, with that anniversary, 18 years later, we have the engineers of the University of Alaska in Fairbanks who recreated through sophisticated computer models of the Solomon Brothers building. Now, this would be known as Building 7. Now, if you haven't followed what went on with 9/11, you're saying, wow, I know of the North Tower 1 and 2. What's Building 7? The Solomon Brothers building. Well, the Solomon Brothers building is where the IRS and the Secret Service and many other buildings, the city's emergency offices were all there. And let me see, what was some material that was when that building was blown up? Let's see what some of the materials. Oh, I remember now. The Clinton Foundation. All the investigative work on the Clinton Foundation happened to go bye-bye that day. And many, many other investigations that were going on about the Clintons all went bye-bye that day. Now, you have to understand, who was the mayor? Giuliani was the mayor. What was he? He was a former prosecuting attorney and district attorney. You would think a guy with that kind of education and history and expertise, being the mayor, would say, hey, wait a minute, guys, I think we should have a crime scene here, and I think we should collect some forensic evidence. No, he didn't. No, he didn't, because he was following his marching orders. So, what did these engineers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, after they recreated sophisticated computer models of the Solomon Brothers, based on the actual blueprints of the building's construction, and after 4+ years of research, this was their determination. You ready for this? The fires could not have caused the free fall speed collapse of the building, contrary to NIST. Now, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That's the government. Study, which concluded, it is our conclusions. Now, listen to this. This is these. They're saying that NIST did what they reported was erroneous. It was wrong. Were you with me? But what did they find? Here's what they found. It is our conclusion that the collapse of Building 7 was a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of all columns in the building and not a progressive collapse involving the sequential failure of columns throughout the building. Well, anyone who watched the buildings come down in their own footprint could have told you that. But NIST couldn't. The mainstream media couldn't. The government couldn't. Just like the North and South Tower, huh, folks? They came down on their own footprint, didn't they? There's a reason for that. Because starting in August of 2001, they basically said that, well, they're going to redo all the wiring and upgrade the computer systems in these three buildings. Now, because of what took place in the mid-90s, when the FBI was caught hiring a retired Egyptian colonel who thought he was part of a drill to put, and we read this verbatim to you, verbatim. But they hired him and his team. They told him, the FBI told him he's going to be part of a drill. So he was supposed to put these dummy munitions throughout the building, and then he thought the whole part was the drill. Well, when the colonel gets the munitions, he finds out it's live munitions. He thinks it's an honest mistake. Ha ha ha. He goes up to the FBI and says, hey, FBI, wait a minute. This is supposed to be dummy munitions. These are live munitions. The FBI says, well, it's all part of the drill. You go forward with what you're supposed to do. The colonel, being a demolition expert, what he did was he put the demolitions in a place where it wouldn't take down the columns where they were going to explode. He put them in a place where they would not collapse the columns. The bombs went off. We had this big event. So ever since that time, my friends, the whole WTC complex, every single night since the mid-90s, they had bomb-sniffing dogs go through these facilities every single night. From the mid-90s until September 6th, 2001. Now, why do you think 5 days before 9/11, all of a sudden, they stopped with the bomb-sniffing dogs? I'll tell you why. Because they weren't upgrading the hardware and the wires and the computers in the WTC 3 building complexes, these 3 particular buildings. They were putting explosives in the buildings to bring it all down. That's what they were doing. And the reason why they took away the bomb-sniffing dogs was because they couldn't allow the dogs to find the explosives. Very simple. Even someone who's been educated in the public fool system can figure that out. And look at all the abnormalities with 9/11. Never mind the bomb-sniffing dogs. How about these big towers that are hit on one side, instead of toppling over, which they wouldn't have done anyway? Folks, architects and engineers, hundreds of them, have come forward in a very particular, well thought out, articulate process to prove to you that explosives took these buildings down. I invite you to go to A&E for 9/11 Truth. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Go to it. It's still on the internet. They're still out there trying to educate you about just that one aspect of it, that the buildings were brought down by explosives. You have John O'Neill, the FBI agent that was forced to retire, who was exposing what was going on with all the Muslims up in Minnesota. And they were part of the 9/11 conspiracy. Notice I didn't say theory. It was a true conspiracy. What happened to John O'Neill? His first day on the job as head of security was September 11, 2001, for the WTC complex. He died. Look at it all, folks. No forensic evidence, no crime scene. And then when you have private people, people who well-educated people who did forensics and found out that there was all kind of nitrates and everything else of explosives inside the dust that was part of it, all the film footage, all of it, folks. What happens? It was all shut down, and the government and the media just went with NIST, which was complete bull dung, lies to you. How could there be no forensic evidence collected? Isn't that like the basic of basic investigative work? Look at all the warnings before 9/11. Attorney David Chips, call your representatives, call your senators, let them know that they're going to use Osama bin Laden to blow up buildings in lower Manhattan, quote, unquote. I did. I called. Did you? You didn't know about it. Why? Because you're getting all your information from the mainstream media. Maybe not now. Maybe you have woken up enough with all these things that have gone on that maybe you're looking outside of the controlled mechanism of disinformation for truth. Hopefully you are. Folks, what about the fireman's testimony? What about the EMTs and paramedics' testimony? What about all the footage of all the explosions going off? What about even the mainstream media people that were there at ground level reporting about all the explosions going off? What about the bloom of white smoke that came out of the lower 5 floors? Why? Because they were blowing up them columns to bring the buildings down. What about the gold that was transferred out of the buildings days before? Truckloads of it. What about Willie Rodriguez, the man who had the key holder to every single building in the WTC complex and where he was when it went on, when the explosions took place? What about all his testimony? None of it. None of it was brought forth to the American people. What about the dancing Israelis who were celebrating the buildings when they came down? And how they were linked to the Mossad, how they were part of the whole operation. What about the planes that didn't hit the Pentagon? No plane hit the Pentagon, my friends. We know that. And if you still think a plane hit the Pentagon, I invite you to go on the internet and look at the pictures. Folks, when I was in the Marine Corps, I did crash rescue, search, and air rescue. I have personally been on many scenes of aviation crashes. I have picked them up. I have rescued people from them. I have smelt them. I have dealt with them. I have been up to my knees in it. There was no 757 crash at the Pentagon. We had CNN reporters come right out and saying, but they didn't show it to you, but you can find it in documentaries now, about there was no plane crash at the Pentagon. Folks, we have so much information that just flat out tells you that 9/11 was an inside job. And how do we know this? Not just from the evidence. What about in 1998, the document Project for the New American Century that we read to you verbatim? How they needed a new cataclysmic event, a new Pearl Harbor. Remember that? We read that to you. And who was on that panel that put this together? Former Secretary of Defense at that time, Donald Rumsfeld, Bush's, Cheney's, so many of them. All the people that were in the administration involved with 9/11 were on that panel to write the project for it's called the PNAC document, Project for the New American Century. All of them. Including Mr. John Bolton. So, my friends, for the sake of time, I've got to stop because I could sit here and tell you about all the things about 9/11 that just didn't happen. Now, what about Larry Silverstein, who was the leaseholder? See, the WTC complex was owned by the Rockefellers. No surprise there, right? Now, you got to understand something about North Tower 1 and 2. I'm going back some time here, my friends, but both of them were, number one, they had major problems. They were insulated with asbestos. It was going to cost tens of millions of dollars to remove that asbestos and replace it with another insulation and then get rid of the asbestos in a way that is permissible. Tens of millions of dollars to do it. Both buildings had a low occupancy percentage, a low occupancy rate. If I remember right, and I'm going back, folks, I believe North Tower 1 was only at a 48% occupancy rate at that time. So not only was it losing money from rentals, if you would, but the potential that it had in cost to Larry Silverstein and the Rockefellers was phenomenal. And what more of a psychological shock to see the tallest buildings in the world come down on their own footprint? Remember that Hegelian dialectic? Crisis, reaction, solution, create the crisis, get the emotional response you want from the people bringing the solution, which was your goal the whole time. Do you think it worked this time, my friends? Absolutely it did. But let's listen to Larry Silverstein talking about Building 7, known as the Solomon Brothers Building. I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. Folks, the fire was spotted fire, was strictly room and contents fire. Matter of fact, Lieutenant Palmer, who died, actually reported in that we can handle this. We're good. Let us continue. That they were not going to be able to contain the fire, and I said, you know, we've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made the decision to pull it, and then we watched the building collapse. Larry Silverstein. Folks, what does pull the building mean? It is a term, a demolition term, to blow because they're pulling the building down on its own footprint. They're not exploding it out, my friends. They're pulling it in through precise location of demolitions. Do you think with one phone call of Larry Silverstein, in a 40-minute time, 45-minute time period, they had the demolitions there on site. They were able to get them there, wire that building, get everybody out, and then blow it up in 45 minutes? Do you really think so? He's telling you they pulled the building. He's admitting it. This was an interview with BBC. How'd they do that? That's some miraculous work, wouldn't you think? How'd they do that for the North and South Tower, 1 and 2? How'd they do that? Because all the demolitions were already in place, my friends, as of September 6th. That's why they stopped the bomb-sniffing dogs, which had been going on for years, every single night. Okay, I have to stop here for the sake of time. I could go on forever on that. Now, we are going to be talking to you about a school that you probably never heard of. And you probably never heard of this school, and I've already taken too much time on 9/11, and I really didn't want to do that. I apologize. But what it is, my friends, this school trains, teaches, and informs all the higher level academia in this country, particular Columbia University, Harvard, Yale, UCLA, Berkeley, and others. But particularly them four. Okay, and it goes right on through the Ivy League. Brown University is another one. Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island is another one. If you're spending $65,000, you know what? I had a conversation with somebody, and I cannot say his name. But this person is in the medical field, and he's sending his daughter to Brown. She got some scholarships, but boy, he's paying out a lot of cash. So she's there for 2 years, and he sees a progressive change in her mindset as she is attending Brown University. And we had a deep conversation about it. And he was disgusted by the transformation that's taken place with his daughter. Disgusted by it. So, what school am I speaking of? I am speaking of a school called the Frankfurt School. And I'm going to read this quick to you. But first, let me show you the logo, if we could. Let me show you the logo of the Frankfurt School. Stanley, if we could change the camera, please. Thank you. And Bill, if we're able to blow that up, I don't know if we can, but that would be great. Thank you, Bill. Folks, this is the logo of the Frankfurt School, and you're reading it right. In Satan we trust, do what has to be done. It almost reminds me of the Mossad logo. Through deception thou shalt do war. Almost. It's along the same part. So, Friedrich Nietzsche. God is dead, behold, I give you the Superman. Okay, the Frankfurt School is a group of German-American scholars, mostly Jewish, who develop highly provocative and original perspectives on contemporary society and culture, drawing on the works of Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche, Freud, and Weber. Now, Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche, Freud, we have covered with all of you. Hegel, the Hegelian dialectic, Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Freud, we've all covered them with you. Unfortunately, and I'll have to do this another time, we've also got into Rousseau, but he's not listed with his work here. Weber, we're going to have to get into another time, my friends. I've taken too much time already. Their idea of a cultural revolution was not particularly new. Joseph Comte de Meister, from 1753 to 1821, who for 15 years had been a Freemason, had this to say. Until now, nations were killed by conquest, that is, by invasion. But here, an important question arises. Can a nation not die on its own soil without resettlement or invasion by allowing the flies of decomposition to corrupt to the very core those original and constituent principles which make it what it is? I want to read that again. Until now, nations were killed by conquest. Armies, invaders. That is by invasion. But here an important question arises. Can a nation not die on its own soil without resettlement or invasion, but by allowing the flies of decomposition to corrupt to the very core those original and constituent principles which make it what it is? What is our original and constituent principles, my friends? Our founding documents, our common law, our Judeo-Christianity society, right? That's what they're talking about. Are these documents, our way of life, our laws, have they been corrupted through an invading army? A physical kick your door in invading army, run over the border? No. Yes, the border is being erased from the NAU, the North American Union. I get that. Yes, we no longer have a common law system in this country. We have admiralty law, law mercantile. I get that. Our Judeo-Christianity has been taken out of at all levels of our education system, and our education system is turned into an indoctrination system. I get that. Our Constitution has been usurped. I get that. Our Bill of Rights are no longer rights, they're now benefits that can be altered and or taken away. I get that. Our history has been taken away from us, altered, and usurped. I get that. But all of this has not been done, my friends, by the Russian army, the bad Russians. It has been done incrementally, purposefully, and orchestrated internally. As much as I can't stand Abraham Lincoln, he was right when he said, if we are to fall, surely we will fall from within. I get that. And we have. And we are. The process is ongoing. Let us continue. What is the Frankfurt School? In the days following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, oh, by the way, the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Who financed that? Who? Bankers out of New York and London. I get that. It was believed that a workers' revolution would sweep into Europe and eventually into the United States. That was the goal. The top 12 people of Lenin, guess where they came from, my friends? They weren't Russian. They were Americans from New York. We read that to you verbatim many years ago. That the workers' revolution would sweep into Europe and eventually into the United States. It failed to do so. Towards the end of 1922, the Communist International, the Comintern as it became to know, you had Comintern 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, began to consider the reasons for its failure. On Lenin's initiative, a meeting was organized at the Marx-Engels, Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, the two authors of the Communist Manifesto Institute in Moscow. The aim of the meeting was to throw light on the meaning of Marx's cultural revolution. What did cultural revolution entail? What was it all about? First among those present was George Lucas, a Jewish-Hungarian aristocrat and son of a banker, international banker. He had become a communist during World War I, a good Marxist theologian, and had developed the idea of revolution and eros, sexual instinct used as an instrument of destruction. What did I just tell you about what the new fetish is earlier? To get the new big sexual thing, the new sexual fetish. Have sex, get the girl pregnant, abort the baby. It's one big process. They're destroying life, aren't they? Then there was Millie Munzenberg, another Jewish, folks, whose proposed solution to the problems besetting society was to organize the intellectuals and use them to make Western civilization stink. Only then, after they have corrupted all of its values and made life impossible, can we impose the dictatorship of the proletariat. That's the beautiful people. This is his quote. It was, said Ralph D. Telatendo from 1916, died in 2007, the conservative author and co-founder of the National Review, a meeting more harmful to Western civilization than the Bolshevik Revolution itself. Lenin died in 1924, but at that time Stalin had risen to power and was beginning to look on Willy Milzenberg. And let's show you a picture of this man. Folks, look at this man's eyes. Look at his eyes. Folks, I know these people are Jewish. They know it's the Jews, it's the Catholics, blah, blah, blah. Folks, they're all Satanists. Look at this man's eyes. Every single one of these people are Satanists. Okay. And then I want to show you a picture of George Lucas. And if you're looking at, actually it's Georg. It's J-E-O-R-G, no E. Okay? It's Georg Lucas, and there's a hyphen over the A. And other Jewish revolutionaries, like Trotsky and others, as dangerous Marxist revisionists. See, they have revised all of our history. The founding fathers were nothing but a bunch of slave-owning white men. No, a lot of the founding fathers freed their slaves. Most of the slaves didn't want to leave. The founding fathers killed all the Indians. Andrew Jackson, probably one of the top 3 greatest presidents in the history of this country, for what he did to the bankers. What's he known for? Oh, he gave smallpox. He laced smallpox on the wool blankets given to the Indians, and the Indians got smallpox from Andrew Jackson. Folks, come on. They didn't understand cells and germs in the early 1800s. Think of that. Let us continue. Okay, in June 1940, on Stalin's orders, Munzenberg was hunted down to the south of France by the NKVD assassination squad and hung from a tree. In the summer of 24, after being attacked for his writings by the 5th Comintern, that's the Communist International, Lucas moved to Germany. Here he chaired the first meeting of a group of communist-orientated sociologists. This gathering was led to the foundation of the Frankfurt School. The school, designed to put flesh or meat on the revolutionary program, was started at the University of Frankfurt in the Institut für Sozialforschung, SNURG. To begin with, the school and institute were indistinguishable. In 1923, the institute was officially established and funded by Felix Weil. Weil was born in Argentina to a very wealthy international banker, was sent to attend school in Germany at the age of 9. He attended the universities of Tübingen and Frankfurt, where he graduated with a doctoral degree in political science. While at these universities, he became increasingly interested in socialism and Marxism. Karl Gergenberg, the Institute's director from 1923 to 29, was an avowed Marxist, although the Institute did not have any official party affiliations. But in 1930, Max Horkheimer assumed control. He believed the Marxist theory should be the basis of the Institute's research. When Hitler came to power, the Institute was closed and its members, by various routes, fled to the United States. Whoa, wait a minute. Hitler was this bad guy, which he was. But Hitler shut this institute down because he saw what they were doing to the German people with their indoctrination. Where did all these Marxist communists run to? Where were they welcomed with open arms? Where were they put into positions of high-level academia? The United States of America. And ended up, listen to some of these universities that all these people wound up in charge of. Listen to this. Columbia, Princeton, California at Berkeley, and others. The school included among its members the 1960 guru of the New Left, Herbert Marcuse. And we have covered Herbert Marcuse in past shows. Denounced by Pope Paul VI for his theory of libertarian, which opened, listen to what the Pope said, which opens way for sexual license cloaked as liberty. Now look at the Catholic Church. Pedophilia rampant throughout it. And they protect the pedophiles. Max Hollenberg, Theodor Adorno, the popular writer Erich Fromm, Leo Lowenthal, and Jürgen Habermas, all individuals except Habermas were of, okay, sorry folks, I am really skipping myself on time. I'm going to skip that whole part. Basically, the Frankfurt School believed that as long as an individual had the belief, or even the hope of belief, that his divine gift of reason could solve the problems facing society, then that society would never reach the state of hopelessness and alienation that they considered necessary to provoke a socialist revolution. Their task, therefore, was as swiftly as possible, now listen to this is their own words, to undermine the Judeo-Christian legacy in the United States and Europe. Let me say that again. Their task, therefore, now this is quote unquote, was as swiftly as possible to undermine the Judeo-Christian legacy. To undermine Western civilization, the Frankfurt School called for the most negative and destructive criticism possible of every sphere of life, to destabilize society and bring it to its knees, to engineer collapse, to produce crises and catastrophe. This became the aim of these maladjusted and mentally sick revolutionaries masquerading as high-powered intellectuals. And you wonder why every aspect of Americana has gone into the sewer hole. Because this is on purpose. Charlotte Iserbyt's book, she was an Undersecretary of Education in the Reagan administration. Read her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. The documents are in there. It's a thick book, my friends. It's going to take you months to read it. I've read it twice. The documents are there from UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization. Who controls the curriculum of our indoctrination public fool system today? Let us continue. Their policies, they hope, would spread like a virus. Listen. Continuing the work of Western Marxists by other means, as one of their members noted, to further advance their quiet cultural revolution, which brings us back to what? The document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which we've done multiple shows on before. The Frankfurt School made the following 12 recommendations. And I'm going to read these recommendations for you, folks. And as I'm reading this to you, I want you to think about George Carlin's statement about critical thinking. All of these tendencies were calculated to, listen to this, their own words, to undermine the foundations of American society and create the dystopia that we now see around us. So what was their goal with these tenets? They were calculated to undermine the foundations of American Judeo-Christian society. One, the creation, folks, this is over 50 years, over 60 years old. Over 60 years old. The creation of racism, offenses, and hate speech laws. Has that happened? Absolutely. They completely control, not only do they control language, but because they control language, they control thinking. They put borders around your language. Hence, they have put borders around your thinking, particularly your critical thinking. Racism offenses, what does that do? That creates more division, more animosity amongst the races that make up our nation and our American Judeo-Christian society. This is why you can't talk about Christians and Jesus Christ in schools and prayer and the history of Christ and what he brought to the world. But Muslim classes on the Quran are protected by law. Number two, continual change to create confusion, especially in school curricula. Can you say Common Core? Can you say Common Core? This is exactly what Common Core is about. The math doesn't work, the history's been changed, and now white people look at their history classes and they look in the mirror and they hate themselves. Because all the problems of the world were caused by the white people. This is what it's about, my friends. Common Core math doesn't work. I have been asking for what? 4 to 5 years now for a school teacher, a school administrator, someone to come on this program and explain Common Core, just the math to us, because it doesn't work. I have had personal conversations with teachers who are actively teaching in the state of Vermont right now who cannot explain Common Core math, but they won't have a discussion with me because it bruises their religion. It assaults their mindset. They can't ask questions, my friends, because the answers scare them. Number three, masturbation propaganda in schools combined with homosexualization of children and their corruption by exposing them to child porn in the classroom. Well, we've gone even farther than that, haven't we? As I reported to you, they're teaching 6th graders, and I reread this to you verbatim, how to give oral sex. And now we've gone beyond that, haven't we? Now we have pedophiles through different public schools, particularly in libraries. Now there's another big program going out in California about all these pedophiles dressed up as women and clowns and every other thing, rubbing all over your children. We have pedophiles and boys, little boys, 11-year-old boys, dressed up as girls on mainstream programs like ABC, Good Morning America, with the crowd clapping. And we have parents, talk about indoctrination, we have parents taking their children to these events willingly. Folks, when I said to you in the beginning of this program that you've never heard of this school I'm about to speak of, but yet it has affected every level of academia and education in our country, I'm not exaggerating, am I? And I've only gotten to the first 3. Next week we'll continue down to number 12. But think of this. Masturbation propaganda in schools combined with homosexualization of children. And now the courts are protecting children who are 8 and 11 years old who want to have a sex change. Folks, I got a question for you. How do you think 8 and 11-year-olds are thinking about sex at all and gender at all? Because the public school system that we pay a mighty high expense for is indoctrinating them to do such, and all under the marching orders of the Frankfurt Institute that you have never, ever heard of. My friends, we'll continue this conversation next week. But this was the basis of what happened to our Judeo-Christian society. My friends, we are very thankful that you take the time from your busy day to view our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, obtain knowledge, and manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility, and we thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find. Can't believe